You're now listening to Sound Talent Media. Check out more shows at soundtalentmedia.com.
TIAA is on a mission. Why? Because 54% of Black Americans don't have enough savings to retire. So in collaboration with big-name artists like Wyclef Jean, TIAA released Paper Right, new music inspiring a new financial future. With 100% of streaming sales going to a nonprofit that teaches students how to invest. Stream Paper Right now and help close the gap.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the podcast. This week, I'm talking to, and I can't believe I'm saying this out loud, Pete Anderson. Pete is a true legend in the guitar world, and it was truly a treat to sit down and talk with him for this length of time. We get into all sorts of different territory on the main episode. Patreon is absolutely bonkers, so if you want to get access to that, go to patreon.com/tonemob and you can get the bonus episodes that I record every single week. There are a ton of episodes back there, and it's honestly some of my favorite conversations ever, including this one with Pete. Now, that is not to say that the main episode is any slouch at all. It's still one of my favorite conversations I have ever had, and I think you will agree. I want to get right into it, but one small bit of business before we do. Just a quick reminder, if you're doing any gear buying, please check out the affiliate links associated with this show. They are down in the show notes. If you go to tonemob.com/sweetwater or tonemob.com/reverb for any of your gear purchasing needs, anything you do through those links will come back and help support the show. So if you're already planning on buying stuff, please hit those links and it will help me out immensely. I really, really appreciate that. All right, I don't want to clog up your time with any more of this business stuff. I want to get right to the meat of this episode with Mr. Pete Anderson. Here we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Tone Mob Podcast, the show about guitar stuff, occasionally, sometimes. I'm your host, Blake Weiland, and with me today, I have somebody I've been looking forward to talking to for a long time, Mr. Pete Anderson. How's it going?
It's going good. Waiting for summertime.
Waiting for summertime in L.A. Isn't it always summer?
Pretty much every couple of days. You know, it'll act like spring for about 3 days, and then summer hits. It'll act like winter for about a week, and then summer hits. So it's like what they used to say about Ireland was like, if you don't like the weather, wait a few minutes and it'll change. But here it's like, if you like summertime, just wait a few days and it'll be summer again.
They say the same thing about Oregon that they say in Ireland. So, you know. Yeah,
exactly.
It is known as a rainy area, at least in the Willamette Valley, but I don't know. We have pretty nice summers. It's
it's gorgeous up there. I love it.
Yeah.
Very nice spot.
Yeah. Well, you know, I don't even know where to begin with you. You know, oftentimes we'll get people on the show, especially, you know, some amp builders or people who haven't got the opportunity to tell their story. But man, you've done so much in your career. I don't even know where the best place to start is.
Well, it's good that it's a guitar show because it's all been about guitar. I mean, the motivating factor in everything I've ever done has been basically to play my guitar. Mm-hmm. So everything's been an excuse to play.
I love it. Mine, I'm working on that. I end up talking about it more than I end up playing it, but I sure do love it. When did you start? Like, when did it really bite you? When did the love for the instrument bite you?
I've told this story many times, but you know, I was like 6-7 years old in the 50s, and in the 1950s, media wasn't anywhere near what it is now, right? So you had 3 television stations, maybe 3 radio stations, you know, 2 new. Detroit, we had 2 newspapers, so media was pretty limited. So your outlook on the world was moderately limited, and so as a boy. And you probably had this experience too with your parents and your parents' friends. It would be like, hey, Blake, what do you want to be when you get big? What do you want to be when you grow up? You know, they keep asking you. Well, in the 50s, I didn't know what my possibilities were. It's like
Right.
my parents were auto workers, and I knew they didn't want me to be an auto worker or a laborer. So that wasn't a good answer. And then I knew about doctors. I kind of didn't even know about lawyers. I knew about police. I knew about the military. So, you would say, I want to be a doctor or some, make your parents proud, whatever your 8-year-old kid says he wants to be when he grows up. But I saw Elvis Presley on television.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I want to be that guy. And in retrospect, what attracted me to Elvis, because I thought Elvis was playing the guitar, was Scotty Moore, because Scotty
Right.
was the guitar player. So in retrospect, the sound of the guitar attracted me to wanting to be Elvis Presley. Now, I sort of have a theory that maybe every generation or a generation and a half, I'm not quite sure, but there's been these cataclysmic musical events. Elvis Presley was a cataclysmic, it was like a comet hitting. I mean, it's unbelievable the amount of records he sold under the restrictions of limited media and the population. It was
Absolutely.
unbelievable, unheard of, unheard of. So my generation, it was Elvis Presley. The next generation was the next one pretty quickly was the Beatles. Then there was, Bruce Springsteen, Kurt Cobain. Every generation has had pretty much some sort of a musical catalyst. And in my case, it was Elvis. So my theory was that you would see this cataclysmic musical event, be attracted to it and go, okay, I want to be Elvis Presley. And then after a while you go, well, maybe I'm not going to be Elvis Presley. But if I can't be Elvis Presley, the next best thing is to be Elvis Presley's guitar player. And if you can't be Elvis Presley's guitar player, then the next best thing is maybe I could be his bass player. And then the next best thing is be his drummer. And then after that, it's like, well, maybe I could hang out with the band and be a sound mixer, whatever. You wanted to be part of that pyramid of success, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so it was Elvis Presley and oddly enough, Scotty Moore, because it was really, I just fell in love with the sound of the sound and the image of the guitar at 8 years old set me off like a stick of dynamite. It was like, I didn't know I could make a living at it. All I knew is I wanted to play guitar. That was motivation.
Wow. I'll never forget. I mean, it's gone now, unfortunately, but touring the Gibson Memphis facility, and they had one of Scotty's guitars there, and it almost gave me goosebumps.
I
It was
got
like,
to meet him.
whoa.
I got to
You
meet him.
did?
Yeah,
Wow.
I met him in Memphis, playing with Dwight at a Elvis birthday bash at the Pyramid, which is the big basketball arena, and that was the era when Michael Jackson was married to Lisa Marie Presley,
Okay.
and they threw this big event, and everybody played Elvis songs, and we played Mystery Train actually, and Scotty was there with whoever was left from his group, and I got to shake hands with him and say hello and just kind of tip the hat to him.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
Very, very cool. So what was the progression like there? So that's it. This is a good place to go into, I think. So you saw Elvis.
Oh, you mean
That
from 8 years old on?
That's what I mean. Like at what point did you start at what point did you get hooked up with Dwight? Because obviously there's a giant gap there.
Oh,
that we
yeah,
could
right.
probably fill in.
Yeah, from 8 to 35 or something, 34.
Mm-hmm.
Well, first of all, I had to get a guitar, and that took a while because again in the 50s, I told my mom I want to play guitar, so she was happy to have music in my life. So we went to the local East Detroit Conservatory of Music, and the guy said, she said, my son wants to learn to play guitar. And they went, okay, he's too small to play guitar. That's what they said. And I wasn't abnormally small. They were just full of. And they said,
Right.
he's too small to play guitar, but he could play Hawaiian guitar, which was a big deal back then. They had Hawaiian guitar on television and Aldo Ray and all that kind of stuff. He said he could play that. And then when he gets a little bigger and can hold the guitar, he can switch over to guitar. And so we bought that. And all I cared about was they gave me a guitar, and it had one of those metal flip nuts that made the guitar into effectively like a dobro or a Hawaiian guitar. So I started with that, and I did that I did lessons for about, I don't know, maybe 4 weeks, and I would play the guitar on on the kitchen. I mean, on the dining room table in front of the window, and my buddies would look through the window and go, "Hey, Petey's playing his guitar. Hey, look at this." So then I would take the guitar, and it had a string around it, one of those multicolored cords that was uh, basically a guitar strap. So
Yep.
I would put that around my neck and open my front door, and the kids would get on the porch, and I'd have the screen door between me and them, and I'd put it, and I figured I didn't know why I could not fret the strings because the nut was so high, but I thought that the tuning pegs had something to do with playing the guitar. So I start wanking on those things and singing "Hound Dog." You ain't nothing but a hound dog, and the
Hound
kids would
dog,
all
yeah.
scream, and so. After that, and I took the guitar back, and it was way out of tune. And it was like, I don't want to do this anymore, Mom. I'm not playing guitar. So that was like, 9 years old. Then Bob Dylan hits the neighborhood. I'm 16, and I was like, man, I went to a couple of little parties out in the field. Kids were hanging out. Somebody brought a guitar, and I was like, it started all over again. It's like, I'm going to go get a guitar. I just went down to the store. I got $50 out of my account, and I bought a German-made gut string classical guitar, and I bought a Bob Dylan songbook and started learning like Maggie's Farm, which had one chord in it. It had chord symbols, and I know the songs because I was listening to them, and I would just kind of imitate and figure out what the chords were and just beat on that guitar. And that's really when I started playing, when I was about 16 and a half. And then that was a long process in Detroit of back then. I mean, I actually heard "Born Under a Bad Sign" by Albert King when it was a hit in the 60s. It was on the radio, and
Wow.
we had soul stations in Michigan. In Detroit, there were stations that played exclusively black music. So I got to hear Albert King, I got to hear BB, I got to hear Muddy Waters. It really went on a blues tangent. But my first band was a jug band, but it was basically me listening to folk blues. And I listened to folk blues and got attracted to reading the liner notes of the records and then kind of working my way backwards. Like if I would see Dave Von Ronk and he would talk about Mississippi John Hurt or something, they were kind of like books, like history books. So I would work my way backwards to find out who these guys' influences were and who they were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And then another cataclysmic event, I was 17, and there was a club in Detroit called the Chessmate, and it was all ages. So they didn't serve alcohol, and it was a folk club. So I saw Joni Mitchell there. I saw Dave Von Ronk. I saw Spider John Kerner. I saw Patrick Sky. I saw Tom Rush. All these folks guys there. And one day I called the club, and I was going to go there with my girlfriend and another friend of mine and his girlfriend. And they said, I called up and I said, who's playing tonight? And they said, the Paul Butterfield Blues Band. And I went, what? I had no concept of a blues band. None. I was like, blues was a guy with a guitar, like one Lightning Hopkins.
Just one dude.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I went, oh. So I asked the guy on the phone who actually was the owner. His name was Maury. I said, what's a blues band? To me, I thought it might be the Blues Magoos or some kind of rock band that I didn't want to see. I was totally a folkie. So he said, that Paul Butterfield's this young guy from Chicago and he plays the harmonica. And I was like, harmonica? Because I played harmonica in Iraq like Dylan. And I went, harmonica in a blues band? So now my interest was perked. It was like, man, I want to hear this. I had no idea what I was walking into.
Sure.
So I said, okay, let's go. So me and my friends go. We walk in the club. Michael Bloomfield's on the phone at the front door yelling at somebody on the phone. I'm like, who's this guy? He was talking on the phone. I walk in. All these electric instruments are there. I'm expecting the worst. We sit down. The club holds maybe 50 people at most. We sit down. It's the original Paul Butterfield Blues Band without Sam Lay on drums. I think it was Billy Davenport. But it's Mike Bloomfield, Mark Naftalin, Jerome Arnold, Elvin Bishop. It's the guys. And so I'm sitting there and they get ready to play. And Butterfield's not, I don't know Butterfield from Adam, right? He's not on the stage. And they start playing, and there's a guy behind me talking to a waitress going, hey, go down the street and get me a bottle of wine. Because you couldn't, they didn't serve alcohol, and he was trying to get a drink. Anyway, I looked up, and in retrospect, that was Paul Butterfield, and he was like 22 at the time, or 23. So he goes back in this little green room, and the band goes on stage, and they start playing the instrumental, and they played like 3 songs, and Bloomfield kept looking over his shoulder at the green room, like making faces like, hey, come out here, come out here, come out here. And Paul was in the green room trying to drink a bottle of wine. So finally he comes walking out. He's got sunglasses on. The whole band is on stage, but he doesn't fit. So he's on the floor at the front of the stage. He turns around, back to the audience, sings something, grabs something, I don't know what it is, and turns around and plays amplified blues harmonica through a microphone. Paul Butterfield, first time ever. I'm like 10 feet away. I was like,
whoa,
oh my God, what is, it's gotta be an electric harmonica. I never knew what it was. I'm staring at it, and it was the most amazing sound, and they're just killing it. And finally I got a glimpse of it, because he raised his sunglasses to see what key he was grabbing, what harmonica, and I could see it was like, it's a Marine band. It's the same harmonicas that I play. And I was in total shock. I was like, oh my God, this is unbelievable. So I just worshiped at that altar, went home, next day, went to the record store, bought the record. The record on the back said, Paul Butterfield plays Hohner harmonicas. This record should be played loud. So
nice.
I had a little music room at my house. I went and wrangled my friends in the neighborhood. I said, you need to come to my house right now. They went, okay. And we're 17. We're just getting into learning how to listen to music, let alone play. So they come to the house. I locked it. I closed the door. I put them in. I turn it on loud, and I'm sitting there. All of us are just like mesmerized, just like, oh my God. Now, the back of that record, the first Butterfield record, lists everybody: Sonny Boy Williamson, Lightning Hopkins, Little Walter, talks about all the influences. So then I just went on a trek, trying to find these records and buy them. And record stores weren't anywhere near what they, I have to say, were, because I would say are, because they're none. But if you remember how Tower Records was, well, back then, a lot of records were sold in appliance stores. You would go to the store to buy a washer, a refrigerator, or maybe a record player, and there'd be like 5 bins, 5 little cubicles full of records. That was it.
Right.
In the 40s, 50s, 60s, especially into the 60s, if you had no talent, you didn't make a record. There was no way to fix. You weren't somebody's darling. They were going to give you a record deal. You had to have legitimate talent. I could go through the jazz section and see all the new jazz records in like 3 minutes.
Right.
So
there just wasn't the influx.
Right. Yeah. And so, I started buying these records, and me and my buddies started trying to play blues and have a blues band. That continued on up into my early 20s. My mother, I was an only child. My dad died when I was 5. My mother worked for Chrysler, and so she had retired and decided, she was from southeastern Colorado, and she wanted to move back out to the west. She moved to Phoenix. So I was old enough then, I wasn't living at home. So I started going to Phoenix in the winter from Detroit to visit her, and then back to Detroit for the summer. And finally started a band in Phoenix, brought a couple of friends out from Detroit. We played into our early to mid 20s in Phoenix, and we were playing, like, we had horns in the band. We were playing blues like Bobby Bland and B.B. King and big band blues, Les McCann, a little bit of jazz, stuff like that. And we were still young kids, and we weren't really good on our instruments. I mean, we were okay. And we sort of ran the course, and me and a bass player then decided, do we either go to New York or do we go to Los Angeles? I mean, Austin wasn't even a question at that point. So we decided to go to LA because it was close. And so this bass player and I set out in his Volkswagen van and drove to Los Angeles. And I didn't know one person. I didn't know one person in Los Angeles. And we slept in the van, parked in parking lots. Police woke us up every morning. Can't sleep here. Can't sleep here. And scraped our money together, got a little apartment in Hollywood, started going to jam sessions. And then I was like 23 years old. This is when I did that. So that's sort of, I'm on this long trek. It's like climbing the Himalayas, and I have no structure to it. Like I told you before we started, everything was about the guitar. So everything I was doing was like, do I get to play my guitar today? I'm going to an audition. I'm going to a jam session. I'm looking for a musician. I'm going to a music store. Everything was about me getting to play my guitar. End of story. As zen as it can possibly be, that was the gag.
So there wasn't really a goal still at this point. It was just, how can I play my guitar as much as possible still?
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Under any circumstances. Somebody said, hey, there's a jam session and it's 20 miles away at this guy's garage. Tell me how to get there. I'll go. I just wanted to play. I just was hungry to play. And playing music, I went to art school when I got out of high school. And in talking to people like yourself, I've come to some self-awareness that I used music to create. Some kids, when I was a kid, some kids used music to make money to get them through high school or college. Some kids looked at it like, I want to copy songs, and they were good at it, and I'm just going to play Beatles songs, or I'm going to play, pop songs or whatever like that. And they never looked at it as a creative outlet, and I looked at it as a creative outlet. So I wasn't very good at writing, but I was trying to write, and playing solos was like creative for me, because you get a space of time where, especially in the blues, right? It's like, okay, we're going to sing 2 verses and then you're going to solo over these 3 chords, and you can do whatever you want. So it filled a need for me to create. And that's how I always looked at music, was an opportunity to be creative. And that was the other part of the goal, I think. I used it. My paintbrush was the guitar, and the song was the canvas, and the motivation was create.
Was there ever a moment? Well, I mean, obviously there was at some point, but at when was the moment when you realized, I think I can do this professionally, like for a living, and actually make a living playing my instrument versus playing in some guy's garage forever,
I don't know that I've ever had that moment. That's a good. I applaud you for the question, and it's a great question. But I know it sounds wacky, but it never entered into it. It just never entered in. It was just a very long, slow, logical progression of like. I got a job in a music store because I was like, the coolest thing in the world is, I'd worked in factories as a kid and stuff. And it's like, you mean I can work in a music store and just be around all these guitars? And when somebody doesn't walk in and there's a minute I can pick up a guitar and play. Mm-hmm. Right. So I worked at this pretty cool music store. It was like a vintage store before they were popular. So I worked at this music store and I got to meet all these cats in LA and all these heavy players and kind of be on the cutting edge of what was going on. And, I would go, and listen to, what some of these older guitar players had to say in jazz sessions. And the owner was a sax player, so a lot of heavy cats came in. Art Pepper would come in, and Ernie Watts, and guys that were heady cats that played saxophone in Los Angeles on television, on sessions. And it was kind of a learning experience place for me. But it was my job at the same time. So it was kind of wacky that I had that. And then I would hear about, somebody said, oh yeah, I'm playing this country bar. And so I'd heard about Roy Buchanan and how he tried to make the guitar sound like a steel guitar. And that was fascinating. And these guys said, yeah, I'm the bass player. A guy named Bob Gross was the bass player, but he also worked at the guitar store. And he said, hey, I'm playing a gig at this country bar with some good guitar players. Why don't you come out and see us play? And I was like, yeah, that sounds great. So I went out, Jerry Donahue was one of the guitar players and another guy.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
And so Bob
Mhm.
was up there playing. So I watched him play. I sat in the back, drank a Coke. It was a honky tonk called Ryan's Roundup. And I watched him play. And during the course of the 2 sets that I saw, they played blues, they played country, they played Western swing, they played rock and roll. So they played all the genres. So if you play Western swing, you can play jazz licks. You play Chuck Berry, of course, that's an anomaly to itself. Blues, you can play what you want to play. Country was like blues, but very major key oriented, and they were experimenting with
Mhm.
steel licks. So as a guitar player, it was completely fascinating, and it was mind boggling and eye opening to go, this is a country gig? Because this seems like a smorgasbord of do whatever you want on your guitar gig, right? It's a perfect guitar player
Perfect.
gig. So
Mhm.
I've met this other guy, and he said, hey, there's come to see me play, and I'll let you sit in. And I had never played in a country band, and I was probably 25, 24. So I went in. A guy named was Gary Hanley, and he was the guitar player in this band. And he would say, "Hey, go play a couple." He was very nice to me, and he let me sit in. And I used to go there so much that like they played like Wednesday through Saturday or something like that. So Wednesday or Thursday night, there was not many people in the bar. So like the third set, Thursday night, he'd go up there and play. And the guy that ran the band, the lead singer, he didn't care. So I learned this band's material because Gary let me sit in so much. And one day he called and he goes, "Hey man, I got another gig. I can't do it. Do you want to cover for me?" And I was like, "Whoa, man, play the whole." It was like
Mhm.
it was big. It was a big deal. Big deal.
Yeah, the whole
Yeah,
show? Like,
4
whoa.
sets.
Mhm.
Big deal. So I went in there. I sat in. I did okay. The guys were happy. I was happy that they were happy. Blah blah blah. And Gary Hanley was, and Gary's up north somewhere. I don't know if he's in Oregon or not, but anyway, I got to see him and thank him, which was great for me. But he was a big catalyst, and he got me on stage. And then I just started looking for a country gig. It was like, just country music's great. I could, because I was a good blues player by then, but I was totally illiterate, completely illiterate. And I started on a trek first to find a band and to play and to quit working in factories and, warehouses or whatever I was doing. And I had gotten married. I had a son. I was struggling, trying to pay bills. And I was always going to the guitar stores looking for vintage guitars and stuff and hanging out. And I went to a store. I don't think it might have been the Guitar Center at the time in its infancy. And there was a poster on the wall, and basically it was an ad for Guitar Institute of Technology, but it was an ad for a seminar with Howard Roberts, a guitar seminar. And the way they explained it, it was like this guitar seminar, 3 days, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Howard Roberts. Da, da, da. And I knew who Howard Roberts was. I wasn't necessarily a fan of his playing. He played pretty far over my head. He played jazz, bebop, played anything, classical, television scores, movie scores, blah, blah, blah.
Mhm.
So now I was like 27, and I was a really good blues player, getting to be a pretty good country player, but totally illiterate, musically illiterate. And
Like
again, I
me.
was hungry. I was hungry as man.
Yeah.
What do I need to do? Because I was playing harmonica and guitar, and I had to make a choice. It's like, well, if you play harmonica and try to get great at it, you're still limited. There's so many things you need, and you're not going to be the first choice to get into a band. But if you play guitar, a lot more opportunities. And I was good at both instruments. So I decided to concentrate on the guitars, and I was trying to study. I tried to take a couple of lessons that were not very fruitful. So I went to the Guitar Roberts seminar while I was working at that hip little music store. And I went to the seminar. It was a 3 day seminar with Howard Roberts. And you might be too young to have experienced this, but we had a Christian awakening in the country some years ago where people were trying to convert you to some sort of Christianity and throw your drugs away?
I'm familiar with that
Okay.
time period. Yeah, I wasn't there for it, but I know
there was a
about
big deal where
Mhm.
somebody said, "I converted Dylan. Dylan's going to my church," and they had bands at the church, and everybody was playing anyway. So, and I had a couple of friends that that got hooked up with some Christian zealots, and then they would call me up and go, "Hey, man, I can't hang out with you anymore." And I go, "What? I can't hang out with you, man. I flushed all my drugs down the toilet but the funny thing was I didn't drink or take drugs. It was like, well, yeah, actually you can hang out with me, but it's okay if you don't want to. But they had gotten on this trip, like they'd gone away for a weekend, got baptized, got bathed in the spirit and all the blah 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 blah. So the reason I'm telling you this,
And they just assumed you were doing
yes,
drugs because you weren't a
was a
part of
guitar
it.
player, and I
Okay,
didn't
well,
even
sure.
and they were friends that I'd played music with, but I'd never done drugs with them. So it was like,
Mhm.
well, what what's the motivation here? We've never done drugs together, but they were such zealots that they wanted to they were on fire with the parameters of what they needed to do and how they needed to do it. So the reason I'm telling you this is that I had that experience, but only with a Howard Roberts seminar. It was like I came away from the seminar and I went to the guitar store on Monday after the seminar, and the bass player that had invited me to the country gig said, "Hey, I heard you went to the Howard Roberts seminar. How was it?" And I go, "Bob, I know everything there is to know about music." And he
You had it all
exactly,
figured out.
and he goes, "Oh, bull." And I go, "Really? Ask me anything." Now, what actually had happened? What actually had happened was I'd basically hung out with a master carpenter, and he unfolded all the tools, showed me what they were and how to use them. Was I adept at using them? No. Did I know what they were called? Yes. Did I know how they were used? Yes. Now I had to practice using them. But I knew
Right.
everything. Music can be distilled down. There's only 12 notes. There's 4 diminished chords. There's 4 augmented chords. It's like it can be very simple depending on how it's taught. Consequently, I felt I knew everything about music, and I had these 5 pamphlets with about 5 or 6 or 7 pieces of paper in them stapled together, and it was the Howard Roberts seminar, and it was totally amazing. Everything taught in a way. If you don't know who Howard Roberts was, he was kind of part of the Wrecking Crew, and he was a heavy cat, and he was a heavy thinker. And whether you like his music or not, he was a genius at curriculum. And the curriculum that he
Mhm.
thought up on teaching you how to play guitar was brilliant. It was true genius. And he had a lot of kind of psychological reasons why he did certain things and taught you in a certain fashion. So it was an amazing time for me. So there was no school at the time. It was just a seminar. And I found it hard for me to apply myself by myself. And there was no teacher that says, "Hi, I'm Joe. I teach the Howard Roberts seminar class." It was like there wasn't anything like that. So um, it was hard for me to stick with the program on my own. About a year later, maybe a
Mhm.
little more than a year, they started GIT, Guitar Institute of Technology. And it took me 6 months, but then I was like, I'm going there. Now, I was like 28 at the time, maybe 28 and a half or something. And I think it was like $2,500 or something like that. Anyway, Pat Hicks ran it. Howard Roberts wrote the curriculum. Howard Roberts was there. What year was it? It was like 79, 80, that era. We had Tommy Tedesco, Larry Carlton, Greg Matheson, Pat Metheny, all these cats would come in and do seminars, and it was a school, and you had two classes and two labs 5 days a week for a year, and the year was cut up into
Mm-hmm.
4 semesters, and it was sort of like your 4 years of college. So you had you didn't have electives, but you had, it was divided up in a logical fashion, and it was the most amazing time that I ever spent learning music. And plus, you meet people. I find that learning in a group is better than learning by yourself. So you would go into a class, discuss something, and then you would have a lab. And in the lab, you would have a lab partner that was yours for the whole school year. But you'd have other guys that you had like mind with, and they'd go, "Let's go in this room and let's play today's lesson." And so, what I didn't understand, maybe you understood. What you didn't understand, maybe I understood, and or brains are different. Maybe I would look at it and go, man, I could use this in a country song, where you're looking at it like you could use it in a bebop song. So it was a incredibly great time for me to learn music. And it continues to open like a flower for me. Every time I pick up the instrument, I learn something. And
Mm-hmm.
this was in 1978.
It sounds like something I need. I am also like the most musically illiterate person on the planet. I know what I like to play, and I play, and I've actually gotten a lot better in the last few years as I've gotten to, do this full time and spend way more time with the instrument. But I still have no idea what I'm doing most of the time, and it sounds kind of weird because I'm like, they're like, "What? How'd you do that? How'd you do that?" I actually had somebody message me and asked me to do a video on how I write riffs, and
Right?
I'm like, I picked the guitar up and they come out somehow. I don't know. So
There's some bliss in that. There
mhm,
is some bliss in that you don't want to lose.
sure, but I think it would be helpful to expand the vocabulary outside of that's a C shape and that's a G shape, and I think that's a fifth. Maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. It helps because it helps you expand once you play. Howard Roberts would always say, learn to play something, then play it everywhere on the neck.
Mm-hmm.
So play it low, play it high, play it on the fat strings, play it on the skinny strings, And then he would play certain riffs that were, because the guitar is a grid, it's lines up and down and crisscross, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he would play certain like patterns. He would draw out a pattern and he'd go, play this pattern like X's or something. And so you'd go, oh, yeah, I understand pattern, because guitar is patterns.
Mm-hmm.
And so you'd play it, and then you go, you know what, you know why I play that? And it'd be like, kids would go, no, why? I go, because I like how it sounds. I don't want you to think about, I can tell you why you like it. I can tell you what the notes are, but that's not important. What's important is you played something that you like, and you contained your innocence when playing it. So he was a pretty amazing dude.
Wow, that sounds like an incredible experience.
Yes, it was.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, I'm Vincent, and I'm here to talk about the Maris Mercury X. My dad's always going on and on about how cool Maris is. He really went off on one about the Mercury X the other day. He said something about a 4800 hertz sample rate and 99 preset locations and 33 banks, and something along the lines of the most advanced reverb pedal ever devised by man? That's all true, but I only care about one thing. This pedal sounds sick. So make sure you check out the Mercury X and all the other fine products at maris.us, as well as fine retailers worldwide. All right, Dad, now can I have my Pocky?
How exactly do artists get their music on Spotify, Apple Music, Deezer, Tidal, all these services? How in the world do you get your music there? Well, in the past, you had to use something called a record label. But these days, you can use DistroKid. DistroKid is the absolute easiest way to get your music up on streaming services. and it's the most affordable way to do so. Not only do plans start at $22.99 for the entire year, that's less than $2 a month, DistroKid also does not take a cut of your streaming revenue, unlike some other services out there. Even better if you sign up by going to tonemob.com/distrokid. That's tonemob.com/distrokid. One more time, that's tonemob.com/distrokid. You'll get 30% off. That's right, 30% off their already extremely reasonable prices. So go to tonemob.com/distrokid and get your music out there. We are brought to you today by Sweetwater, specifically the Gear Exchange. You may have heard about this. This is a place where you can go to buy and sell your used gear. Maybe you got a pedal over there that's just kind of collecting dust. Maybe there's something you've been eyeing from the Sweetwater catalog. Well, right now is a great time to turn that unused gear into something you're actually going to use. Even better, if you sell on the Gear Exchange, you can keep 100% of the sale as long as you choose a Sweetwater gift card as your payout method. That is not too shabby because, let's be honest, most of this buying and selling we do is just to fund new gear purchases, and that is a great way to reach a wide variety of customers and keep 100% in your pocket, or rather on your pedal board. So go check out the Sweetwater Gear Exchange and turn that unused gear into something that's actually going to help you write that next huge riff. So supposedly this is a sort of a guitar gear show in theory. That's at least what I tell people to get them to listen to it. And you've had your hands on some of the cream of the crop vintage instruments, especially during that time period. And then was it weird to see the shift from these are just guitars to, whoa, this is a pre-CBS Fender, blah blah blah? Like, when did that occur, and what did that look like? When did the collectors come in and kind of change the market?
When I started working at that little guitar store, music store, it was called Betton Music. The vintage guitar market was in its infancy.
Mm-hmm.
So people were starting to figure out about serial numbers and eras. But you think about it, that was like 1960. Let's say it was 1968 or 1970 or 1971. The electric guitar and the amplifier was in its infancy as well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're talking about a 55 Tweed Fender Bassman. That was 1955. It's less than 20 years later. We're talking about the collectability of that instrument. So
wow,
it was definitely in its infancy and starting to grow slowly. But basically because of the baby boomers, which I'm a baby boomer, we were a giant tsunami wave that kind of roared through the millennium of time because we were a giant group of consumers.
Mm-hmm.
And we were consumers at every age period. So at 17 or 18, we were consuming movies and we starting to go to festivals and things of that nature. And as far as musicians go, there was a larger group of people because of the age group, the generation that were consuming instruments.
Mm-hmm.
So it just grew. The demand grew, and people started looking for better and better instruments. And 9 times out of 10, the better instruments were older instruments that were made by hand. Now, not every one of them was a good guitar. I had a 55 Esquire that was not a good guitar. I've had some older Fender guitars that were not, and Gibsons that were not great guitars. But your chance to get a great guitar would be looking for a used one. You possibly would find one, and everyone was finding their holy grail. The whatever they were looking for, trying to find the ultimate, and then the parameters of what was, why was the Fender good? Because it was pre-CBS. And what's pre-CBS? Well, CBS bought Fender and they started, cutting back on this and cutting back on that. They just started changing the way the instruments were made. So that happened to Gibson. It happened to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Because, corporations started buying up profits of individually owned businesses.
Yeah. Yeah, and then it's interesting. So more came from these are the good ones because there's more good ones from this era, and that just sort of almost fed into the mythology of it all. And now, fast forward to now, and a lot of people, and myself included, like, oh, that's a '50s whatever. And they just start getting excited before they've even played it, because it's old,
Yeah,
which
it's
is
there. You know
interesting.
what? I went to the Dallas Guitar Show a few years ago, and I realized the way they were selling the guitars, that really it was an antique show.
Hmm.
And the value of the instruments was because there's only so many of them. So it wasn't like I'm going to buy a $25,000 '59 Maple Neck Strat and go play it on my gig. That ain't going to happen.
Probably
That
not.
that No, I'm not taking a $25,000 to $30,000 guitar out to the bar and play.
No.
But with the advent of computers being able to cut wood, and there's a thing called a CNC machine,
Hmm.
which is a giant computerized machine. It cuts every guitar perfectly. So these newer guitars, they're incredible.
They are.
They're
Absolutely.
great. You don't need to buy, you don't need to buy a '59 Stratocaster. You can buy something new, rig it up yourself. You can buy a $1,500 one. You can buy a Tom Anderson, $2,500 one. They're perfect guitars. They're great instruments.
Hmm.
So there's plenty of great instruments to be bought, and they're new. They're
Yeah.
newer.
Uh,
You know.
The beautiful thing, and I'm sure this is that you've experienced this too, even from when I was a kid. I was growing up playing, learning about guitars in the '90s, and back then Squires were terrible. And
Right.
and now they're, I mean, yeah, there are very low end ones that you can get at Walmart or whatever, and they're a little hit or miss, but largely Squires are great now. Like a
Uh,
$400 Squire is pretty impressive, like compared
yep.
to what they used to be.
Yep.
The
You
the
can,
low.
and the retro part market is unbelievable.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
And you can have somebody build you a guitar that looks like a beat up vintage guitar, but it's perfect.
But exactly. Everything's just dialed in exactly how you would want it, but it feels old.
Yep. Do you know
Hmm.
who Mark Jenny is?
I know the name. I can't
Okay,
think of
well
who
they're
that is.
they're in Missouri, and they'll build you a '59 Telly that looks just like a '59 Telly, and it'll be beat up and worn out and play perfectly.
That's awesome. That's so
Yeah.
killer.
So that part of it is amazing.
So I want to get into how you got to playing with Dwight at some point, but since we're on this topic of conversation, I want to, and you have perfect experience to have this question bounced off of you. I think that personally, just looking back in time, now is possibly the best time ever to be a guitar player from a gear perspective, uh, across the spectrum. Do you agree with that?
I think I think as far as like having access to great equipment and having access to learning tools like being able to slow stuff down, keep it in the same key, plenty of people showing you how to play. Yeah, it's a total amazing time. The sad part is that the music is just not being supported the same way. There's not enough clubs to play. There's
Mm-hmm.
not I don't trust the economics of our country or the world to have to create or to protect the value of music. They don't care about it. It's become like tissue paper.
Mm-hmm.
And so that part is alarming. And I don't know anybody, I don't know exactly how they're going to you can't force a generation to pick up the slack and say, I'm going to start playing Merle Haggard songs, or I'm going to start playing, Cream songs, or I'm going to start playing Albert King, or whatever. It's cultural. It is the way it is. It just happens. So that part kind of worries me that nobody's picking up the slack the way I would like to see it.
Yeah, I think if I was to go back about 8 years ago, I would have been a little more pessimistic on that front. But I'm feeling a little bit better. Maybe that's just because I was just at a great country show. But I was on country music in particular. I'm a big fan of it, and I was pretty upset really in the 2010s. I would say uh, things were just. I felt like it felt very much like throwaway culture in a lot of
Yes,
ways.
exactly.
And I didn't feel like I feel like there was lip service being paid to the legends, but I don't know that it was a genuine appreciation the way that a lot of people from my generation grew up uh, having grown up with a lot of that music.
Right.
And but now there seems to be a lot of guys and girls from 25 to 37 that really seem to have embraced it,
Yeah,
Um,
I hope so.
yeah.
I hope
uh,
so. I would like to have the faith that you have. I hope so.
but so going back to the Dwight days, I feel like that's where you really became more of a household name with guitar players.
Yes.
How how did that happen?
Well, we finished off where I was illiterate. Then I went to GIT. I started learning how to play and understand music. And during that whole time, I was playing country bars and getting a little better gigs with a little better bands. But I was basically my whole period of the year that I was at GIT. I was playing in clubs, so I would go almost every night. 4 nights a week, 5 nights a week, whatever it was, and I would play from 9 to 1:30.
Mm-hmm.
4 sets. So I'm up there going Silver Wings, and I'm playing it in thirds. I'm doing my
Right.
guitar lessons. It was perfect. Thursday night in a bar, playing Silver Wings in a country bar. There's nobody there. It's half full, less than half full, and I wasn't doing anything that was odd. I was just practicing.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a lesson that day. I got to play it for 4 hours that night in front of people. So it was an incredible time for me to learn and to keep learning. And during that time period, right after I got out of GIT, was it like 1981 maybe? And I actually got a really good gig with really good musicians at an amusement park called Knott's Berry Farm. And it was a step up because the gig ended at 11:30. You weren't playing a smoky bar. You got paid better. Because you got paid better, the leader could hire better musicians. So I was in a really good band with good musicians. And all of the musicians that were in that band, because we were in our 30s, subsequently went on to do really great things in music. So it bore fruit that these guys were great players. And when you're in a group with great players, you play harder, you want to learn, you don't want to be the guy left out. So consequently, I met Dwight through a mutual musician, through a steel player named Boo Bernstein. And he said, "Oh, you should hear this guy. He's got some songs. He's written some songs. He's a country guy, da-da-da-da-da." So I went to hear him play, and or actually, he needed, I got a tape. He said, "Give me a tape." I got a tape of his songs because I'm learning something. We're going to do a gig, a cassette tape. And he told me that Jerry McGee was the guitar player on the tape. Now, Jerry McGee was in the Ventures for many years, famous guitar player. And he was a guy that I hadn't really, I'd heard Albert Lee, I'd heard this guy, that guy, but I hadn't heard a lot of Jerry McGee. So I was like, let me get the tape. I want to hear this guy play. So my motivation was to hear the guitar player. And the guitar was great, but in doing that, I heard these songs, and they were original, and they were really good country songs. And I'm like, who's this guy? Writing new, because I wasn't working with anybody that was writing new, great country songs. So consequently, that's how I first got introduced to him. Dwight had a falling out with Jerry McGee over a girl.
Okay.
And he needed a guitar player to play a gig. And he called me up, and he used a steel player, a friend of mine, Boo Bernstein, and some other guys. And he said, we're going to go play this gig. The drummer was George Green, George Green's son is Brian Austin Green from Beverly Hills
Okay.
912. So, it's like,
Right.
it's crazy how the years go on and things, and you realize who was who and what was what. But
Right.
anyway, we went and played this gig, and I got to learn his material. And then he said, I haven't been playing much lately. I was staying with my dad in Louisville, and I'm living here in LA, and I want to start playing bars again. Do you want to do some playing? And it was only going to be a 4-piece. So he played acoustic, I played electric, bass, and drums. And I said, yeah, sure, I'm up for playing. I play with anybody, anytime, anywhere, blah, blah, blah. So we started getting gigs together as a 4-piece. And I started learning his music because we played a lot of his. He had about 20, about 17 really good original songs at that time.
Okay.
And so I started getting a grip of the arrangements and started arranging them as well while I was playing because they were just bashing through, on a country gig.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really how I got started was you doing it that way,
Right. And then that just like it hit at the right time. I feel like similarly during that time frame, I think there was a craving for, more traditional country music, similar to what there is right now. And I guess that's probably where my optimism lies because, you guys took off like a rocket after that. It was just, it was insane. And we're seeing some of that now with a fella named Zach Bryan. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he's filling up stadiums now. Playing Zach Bryan.
Brown?
Brian.
Oh, I don't
Yeah.
know him. I know Zach Brown.
Yeah, Zach Bryan is a newer guy. He's like
Oh.
27, I want to say, something like that. He was
Oh,
in the
cool.
military, blew up on social media, and he came and played about 15 minutes from my house here last summer. And no joke, there was 30,000 people there just for him. It was crazy.
Nice.
Yeah.
Zach Bryan.
Zach Bryan. Yeah, he's a good songwriter. And he's got a crazy good band with him. It's not as apparent on the records, but them live, they just kill it. They're just shred. So that's pretty. Maybe that's where my optimism is coming from, is seeing that really take hold with people.
That's awesome. I don't know
Yeah.
about that guy. I'm going to look him up.
Yeah, he's pretty good, and there's a lot of the newer cats coming up. Jesse Daniel is the guy I just saw here this week. He sounds like he just came right out of Bakersfield.
Really?
It's it's pretty encouraging.
If you remember, would you text me the names of these guys?
Sure thing. Yeah.
When we're done, just text me.
Yeah. I don't think I have your number, but I'll get it from Karen.
Yeah, that would be great. I'd love to check in on them and see what they're about. I love that stuff.
My wife is, I'm definitely like a fan of all that, but I'm kind of a punk rock and metal guy primarily.
Yeah.
And my wife is very plugged into what's going on in the new, I would say, independent country music scene. So she keeps me posted on what's hot. So
wow. Well,
yeah.
I'd like to hear anybody you suggest.
I will. I'll get a good list from her too. Tyler Childers. Have you heard of Tyler Childers?
I've heard of him. I don't know his music, but I've heard his name.
Incredible songwriting. Like just
great.
Absolutely. Actually, make the hair stand up on the back of your neck.
I'm excited. I'm excited.
Yeah. I'll shoot you a list.
Great.
For sure.
I love that.
I don't know where I was going with that. Where was I going with that topic? Oh yeah. Similarly, like I feel like kind of in that 80s period, there was sort of everything was getting a little bit popified, and kind of putting the sheen of chorus pedals over everything in every genre. But Dwight and yourself, that stuff I feel like really it really filled a need that I think was there at the time.
The public liked it, but they weren't being marketed to, there was marketing over substance was classic. Urban Cowboy made a dent in the creating a bigger population to buy the music, but nobody was servicing it. They certainly didn't want us to do it. I mean, we made an independent EP that kind of caught fire, and we were kind of happily lumped in with the Blasters and Los Lobos as part of that LA group, and they were ahead of us as far as having notoriety, and they kind of took us under their wing, and we did a handful of gigs with them that really was I don't know what to say, was a catalyst for us. So
Wow, I can't believe how the time has flown by. We haven't even talked about your book yet.
Hello there. I'd like to introduce you to your new best friend, the Chase Bliss Audio Lossy. Lossy is a collaboration between Chase Bliss and Good Hertz. And it's meant to give you some control over those weird digital artifacts that come with very compressed audio. You're hearing it right now. All the changes that are taking place are strictly coming from my playing dynamics. I'm just interacting with the pedal and letting it do its thing. In some true stereo goodness. If you'd like some more details about Lossy, I'd invite you to head over to chaseblissaudio.com. I think you're gonna like what you find.
All right, Pete, we are back. We had to take this was an interesting little break we had to take. So we were getting ready to talk about your book. You realized a bunch of time-sensitive stuff popped up. Old friends are stopping by, and you managed to swing back in to wrap up the podcast and do a little bit of Patreon action as well. So I appreciate that.
absolutely. Well, once I found out we were in the same time zone, it worked better for me.
Yeah, for sure. So we kind of left off talking about your book. Yeah. And I think we should highlight that for the listeners because that's something they want to know.
Okay.
And then then I got a couple classic questions that I wrap the podcast up on, and we can slide over to Patreon and see what kind of shenanigans we can pull off there.
All right. Well, the book was, I've done lots of interviews, obviously, through the end of my career, and it made me think in a logical fashion how I make a record because, people would ask me and I would say, well, we do this, we do that. Or interviewing with an artist and they would say, how do you make records? And you want to disclose as much as you can.
Sure.
Because I found picking a producer, I think, is a daunting task for an artist.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how you pick a producer, to be honest with you. You might say to me, oh, you made a record with the Meat Puppets. And I go, yeah. And I go, I love what you did with the Meat Puppets. It's like, how do you know what I did?
Right.
You didn't see me work. I'm not being insulting or arrogant, but you didn't, in the case of the Meat Puppets, all I did was edit. In someone else's case, you could say, hey, I like the record you did, or, this record you did wasn't as good as the other ones. And I would say, like, are you out of your mind? I did everything. I played every instrument. I did everything I could. There's no way to know what somebody does. And if you have a set way that you do things, I guess electronically, like I always use this microphone, I always use this specific thing, then people kind of go, yeah, you got a sound. Mm-hmm. But if I don't recommend that for producing records, I don't recommend having a quote unquote sound. I don't think that's something you want to have. So how does somebody pick a producer? I always sympathize with that. And I did interviews and talked to artists about how I make records. And then I thought, you know what? I think I'm going to write a book about it. Because I used to do guitar seminars, and I used to enjoy, like I'd be on the road playing gigs and stuff, especially post-Dwight when I was touring on my own. Mm-hmm. And so, you want to do a guitar seminar? And I go, yeah, because I liked being in a room full of guitar players with their guitars, 5, 10, 15, 20 people, whatever, asking me guitar questions. And we talk and this, and then I'll say, you play this, I'll play that. And I liked explaining it in that situation, but I did it oddly enough. I started doing seminars. I wrote a set list like I would for a gig. And so I'd have like a little set list at my feet of what I wanted to accomplish during the guitar seminar, what information I wanted to impart and talk about. And I did the same thing for producing. So I sat down and I did an outline. I mean, this has been in the works for 8 years. Now, I haven't been writing the book every day for 8 years, but it's a thought of mine. For at least 8 years, I'm going to write a book on how to produce a record. And partly because there is no book written from a musician's perspective on how to produce a record. If you and I were going to music school, let's say, and we walked by the by the bulletin board one day, and you said, "Hey, check this out. There's going to be a class here on record production," and I would say, "Yeah, that's cool. Well, we're both guitar players. We both like making our own music. Maybe we could go and check out this class on record production. That might be fun." And you said, "Yeah." So you and I go to the class. We enroll. We get in there. The first day, the guy goes and he grabs the board and he goes, "Okay, fader 1, 10 dB at 5 kilohertz." And I'd be like, "Dude, I'm out of here.
Right.
I'm not, I don't. There's nothing I need to know about technical. I'll hire an engineer. I want to know how to produce a record." And that would be the point where, okay, how do I talk about what I do? Because I don't touch the board. I can, but I don't. And I don't. And I can speak somewhat in technical terms because I learned on the fly, but I don't. I'll speak more in broad terms of like, it needs to be wetter, it needs to be drier, it needs to be browner, it needs to be, bluer, whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever you need to get across your point. And so I started cataloging it in my brain, and then I decided to sit down and kind of do like an old fashioned outline where I do like Roman numeral 1 and then big A, then little a, and da 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 da, and subject. And I ended up with the chapters, those Roman numeral 1 through 12 or whatever it is were the chapters. And then COVID hit.
Yeah.
And COVID hit, and I had all kinds of time on my hands. And once all of us, and I'm sure you experienced too, we all were in a panic. Like, what do we do? I mean, do we talk? We can't even talk to our friends. We all just locked ourselves in our houses for months. So once myself and Kevin, my assistant, got over the shock of like, okay, we can wear masks, hang out together. We're not going to get sick. We've both been vaccinated. We're okay. I said, let's write the book. So I bought this computer program called Dragon, and you wear a headset and you talk into the computer and it prints out your words. And the more you talk to it, the more it gets to know your voice. It's kind of scary. It's like AI, and it gets to know who you are and it gets to be more accurate. But Kevin was good enough to sit there and type. So I would take a topic and start from the beginning and just pontificate, 2 or 3 or 4 paragraphs on this topic. Then he would go back and go, "It glitched here, fix this, fix that, fix this." So we did it that way. And then I hired an editor, and I was lucky enough to hire Mike Molenda. Now, Mike Molenda, if you don't know, was the editor of Guitar Player magazine for over 20 years.
Very nice.
So he's a monster editor, like incredible. And actually, the guy that did the artwork for me was recommended by Mike. He was the art director at Guitar Player for many years. So the cover kind of looks like Guitar Player magazine, which is cool. The artwork is amazing and the layout is amazing. So those two guys really did a gigantic yeoman's job on this. And Mike is a musician. He's a drummer and a guitar player. So when he read what I was talking about, he understood what I was saying, even if it was a little weird, and he could straighten it out.
Sure.
So his editing is gigantically important in this book. He did an incredible job. So we did it. We plotted through, we got it done, we reread it, we proofread it, sent it back, printed it, got the glitches out, got everything as good as we possibly could so that you could go to Amazon and digitally download it. You could download it to your Kindle. You can actually buy a hardware book.
Mm-hmm.
Amazon, I didn't know this, but they will make one book at a time.
Yes.
I don't know how they do it, but it's amazing, and they'll make one book at a time.
My sister's in that
So,
biz, so yeah, it's
okay,
crazy how cool that
yeah,
is. Mm-hmm.
yeah. It's like who's on the phone? Blake. What does he want? He wants a book. Hey, Blake wants one of Pete's books. And the guy goes in the back room and he goes, "Brrrr," he hits a button and he comes back. Here, where do we send it? Oh, send it to Blake's house.
Yeah.
It's kind of kooky, but anyway. So I'm just the actual release date is the first Tuesday of May,
Okay.
and Karen's my publicist, and I've got Maggie Rainwater is my social media gal, and I got Kevin working with me, and so we're venturing into how to put out a book, and talking to guys like yourself, and talking about the book, and hoping that we can get out to reach people that have some interest in, it's a philosophy that works whether it's at home recording, on a laptop, garage band, or in a big studio with 5 guys and string section, horn section, whatever you need.
Mm-hmm.
The process of organizing that and organizing it in a proper fashion is always pretty much the same, and should be, because it's going to save you money in the long run if you do step 3 before step 2, and then you got done with step 1 and you said, oh, I jumped to step 3. You're going to probably run into some problems either with tuning or technical problems or something that you didn't think of if you didn't do it in the right order.
Right, because you've done it before.
Yeah, it's like I'm saying, it's like it's kind of like if you called me up and said, hey, Pete, I want you to put in a jacuzzi grotto swimming pool in my backyard, right?
Right.
And I go, and tell me how much it'll cost and what it'll look like. And I'll go, Blake, do you know how many jacuzzi, uh, hot tub, swimming pool, grottos I've put in my life? 200. So here's a drawing. Here's exactly what it's going to look like. And
Mm-hmm.
here's exactly what it's going to cost. So I've had the luxury of, operating under those circumstances so that I can kind of take the mystery out of it, at least to some degree, that the process. Because a lot of people are like, what's a producer? What does he do? And it's actually a misnomer, because I talk about it in the book. Um, when recording got started, there wasn't engineers. We didn't need an engineer. There wasn't that much technical stuff going on.
Right.
It was a mixer. It was a guy that could mix some microphones, because they were all in the same room, and balance everybody out, and actually move people physically. Like, you sit in this corner, you face this way, the mic's here, okay. And then the producer was actually, you didn't need a producer, you needed an arranger, because you wanted to make all the parts work, like the Buddy Holly records,
Right.
how they all work together, and it's the parts work together, and the mixer works together, and so it was really a mixer and an arranger.
And it's interesting how the the term has evolved too, right? Because now there's people who do things like what you've done with full bands and everything. But also, if you talk to a hip hop person, their view of what a producer is completely different. The producer comes with the full beat, and the rapper goes over the top of that,
Right.
oftentimes. Not every time, obviously, but that's very, very common. And they're known as a producer as well. I remember growing up and being into music and hearing that term producer and hearing all these different terms thrown around. I'd hear metal guys do it this way, and Rick Rubin does it like pretty hands off, more philosophical things, and like all these other methods. I was literally growing up being, what is a producer? What is a producer? What does that even mean? And now I have
Right.
a better handle on the fact that it's a bit nebulous, and it really depends
It
on who
it
you're
it
talking
can
to.
it can be
Yeah.
it can be nebulous, and there's three. I've categorized 3 types of producers. One is a musicologist. That would be John Hammond Sr., who discovered Bob Dylan and Bruce
Mm-hmm.
Springsteen and all these other, Bessie Smith, Charlie Christian. He was a musicologist. He had a record collection, so he could take experienced quality musicians to his house and play records and talk to them intelligently about recordings,
Right.
because he'd listened. He couldn't play them. He couldn't play the instruments, but he could say, well, the second solo in Solo Flight, Charlie Christian did this, and listen to what he does. And he could explain it and point it out. Then the second kind is the engineer producer. And that's usually a guy that's an engineer that's got a little bit of creative chops. He's usually a can be a friend of the band, or the band has a guy, a motivated kind of leader of the band that's got a strong will that can work with the engineer. And then there's the musician producer, which is what I am.
Mm-hmm.
And my thing is that I've been out on the floor with headphones on with people demanding certain things of me. I know what that feels like. I know what it feels like to be out of tune, in tune, make a mistake, not make a mistake, get my fellow musicians to play properly, try to get things in one take, things of that nature. And I think that the moniker for me of a producer is wrong. I think it should be called a director. So if you
Oh, yeah.
understand what a director of a film does, you'll understand what I do as a producer. So a director hires a cinematographer. I hire an engineer. The director looks for locations. I find the studio. I'm the producer. I find the studio. The director casts the actors. I pick the musicians if it's a solo artist, and so on down the line. So I think you really look at it like a director. You're more of a director of people and coalescing together to create a successful project.
I love that. That is a great analogy. I don't think I've heard anybody explain it that way, even though some people take a similar approach. I really
Yes,
enjoyed that. That's very, very cool. I'm really
yes.
excited about this book. I got one coming, and I was just checking the calendar while we were talking, and it's gonna drop the day after this episode comes out. So perfect
Oh,
timing.
great,
Yeah.
great.
So yeah, this episode comes out, and then the book should be out the day after. So there we go. It's
Yeah, we'll sell thousands of books after they hear about this podcast.
That's right. That's right. And this is a great episode. Thank you for coming on. I really, really enjoyed this conversation a lot.
Thank you. It was
Mhm.
fun.
Yeah. Well, I've got two classic questions to wrap up on before we go to Patreon. And Patreons were for the supporters of this show get a little extra content, and we'll make sure we give them some goods over there. But before we get to that, I like to ask my classic questions, and we'll go ahead and wrap this up if that's cool with you.
Sure.
All right. First one. What is your favorite boss pedal?
Well, first of all, you'd have to go back to Premier Guitar, and they have that. Is it Rig Roundup?
Yeah, rig rundown. Yeah.
Rig Rundown. You'd have to look at my performance guitar rig rundown because it's kind of funny. I was in Nashville playing a show, and I forget the guy's name. The John Bollinger. He was
Mm-hmm.
interviewing me. So John Bollinger, and we were kind of backstage, and he's like, "Okay, Pete, so we're ready to start rig rundown." I said, "Yeah, let's talk. Let's do it." So he clicked, put the camera on. He said, "All right. Well, first off, I guess." He said, "What's in your rack? What gear do you have in your rack?" And I said, "Well, John, I don't have a rack. I just play straight into the amplifier. But can we still do the interview?" And he was cracking up. And I had a kind of an extensive little rig. I had two pods and a power amp. But classically, the Nashville guys have
Yeah, for sure.
racks of stuff. But I do have a favorite Boss pedal, and there's a story attached to it.
Perfect.
I'm on the road with Dwight. I'm using two Blackface Fender Deluxes that have been heavily modded, and I've got EV speakers. I've got
Mm-hmm.
a Goodrich volume pedal. I've got a modified by what's that guy's name? He ended up building a bunch of amplifiers. Anyway, oh, Paul Rivera. I've got a modified
Oh
Boss
yeah.
Chorus by Paul Rivera, a volume
Nice.
pedal, my telly, and I've got an Echoplex. And the Echoplex is in an effects loop only on one of the two amplifiers. And I'm playing, and the Echoplex takes a crap. I'm on the road. I'm on tour, and it's the early days of Yoakum, and we're hot, and every show is a little better, and we're getting more airplay. And I don't have my Echoplex, and I'm like, oh God! And the band was basically a trio. It
Mm-hmm.
was bass, drums, and guitar. There was a fiddler who didn't play rhythm. Dwight didn't play rhythm. He just kind of beat on the acoustic, so he was more of a distraction. But
Sure.
the trio, bass, drums, and guitar, I needed my rig, right? And so I can't remember what town we were in the Midwest somewhere, and I hadn't bought a guitar pedal I can't remember buying a guitar pedal. I go to a music store, and I knew I wasn't going to find an old gray tube Echoplex. They didn't exist. They were,
Sure. Yeah.
hard to come by. So I go to this guitar store, and I said, I need a delay pedal. And the guy goes, there's this one, and he got me on the first era of the purple Boss digital delay pedal.
Mm-hmm.
The earliest era. I don't know if it's a DM2 or a DM1. I'm not quite sure.
Those are
And
the first analog ones, actually.
yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, let me plug into that thing. So I plugged in, I turned the knob, and I went, hey, this sounds a lot like my Echoplex. I was really happy. And the Echoplex was in an effects loop, which really saved it, so it didn't load up like when you hit the volume. The volume was constant in the Echoplex, so it wasn't overdriven.
Sure.
So I bought this DM1 purple Boss delay, and after that, Echoplex finally took the complete crap that it was going to take from being beat up on the road and never made a comeback. I ended up using that thing.
Ah, very nice. Yeah, DM2 has become a wildly popular and one of the most sought after Boss pedals out there in the years since.
I have two of those, and I also have a Wazacraft.
Yeah. How's the Wazacraft compare?
Oh, it's awesome. It's because it's got the switch on it that takes it from old to older.
Nice, very nice.
Like
I gotta get it.
It's like the best It's the best purple delay you can have, and then you can hit the switch, and it's the degraded one.
I love it. I love it so much. I'm a big Boss fan over here, a listener, and a very important fella in the Tone Mob community. Submitted that I started asking that question years ago.
Okay.
I think around episode 115, and we're on like 350 something now. And
Nice.
he said you should start asking people that, and I've asked it pretty much every time, and it's always fun because they're such a great company, and they have such a variety of different offerings that you never know what somebody's gonna say. I've heard about every answer, I feel like, at this point, but the DM2 is a classic. Love that one.
Have you seen the Silvertone pedal?
The one made with Jackson Audio, I believe.
Yeah.
Yes, I've seen it. I've not played it, but I've seen it.
I have a Silvertone amplifier, which is not the big 212. It's the 112. It's called, was it 1489? 1482 Silvertone. It's a killer. I've got it sampled inside one of my pods. It's the best slide blues, Chicago blues. It's a killer amplifier. Jackson Audio made a Silvertone pedal that sounds exactly like it.
Nice. That's
He's
perfect.
figured it out. And I'm not a pedal guy, but I've got to say, I got a little jam rig. If I show up at a jam session or something, or I'm playing someplace where I'm just one of the guys, I'll bring like that little pedal and the DM2. It's awesome.
That's killer. Yeah, I just actually got a Twin 12 from a listener here the last couple months.
An amp?
Yeah, the amp.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, let's see if I can. I think I can. Let's see. Let's see if I can show you. There we go over there. Oh, it's behind the chair.
There's the orange. Oh, I got you.
It's right next to the orange there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can't believe it's known for like the crunch tones, right? Generally speaking. Yep. But you know what? I love the cleans on that thing. I think it sounds great.
You know what? If you had to get somebody to make that amplifier, it would cost you $2,500.
Oh, easily.
It's hand wired.
Yep. It's all, and there's a lot going on in those things.
I know. It's badass.
I love it. I absolutely love it. All right. Well, before we slide over to Patreon, this is the last question of the podcast, and this is where we get a little bit dicey, a little bit controversial. People tend to get a little upset sometimes at the answer to this, but
is it about gun control?
It's almost that bad. Here we go. What's your favorite kind of pizza?
People will get mad, but pepperoni pineapple.
Oh, pineapple. See, I'm the lone ranger out here. So people either, in my experience, they like pineapple on pizza, or they don't like pineapple on pizza, right?
Right.
I'm the guy who doesn't like pineapple on anything.
Oh, good. At least you're honest.
I'm consistent, right? Like I try.
I was on the road I mean, I'm an old man, so these stories all link together. But I grew up in Detroit,
Mm-hmm.
okay, and there was no pineapple on pizza. Let's
Detroit
just
style pizza making a
yeah,
comeback. Mm-hmm.
the deep dish. So it was just pepperoni, and my mother was Italian, so we loved pepperoni pizza. Couldn't get any. I didn't want no anchovies, no olives. I want pepperoni pizza.
Yeah.
So I went on the road very young, and I went to Canada, and I was playing in Canada. We were playing this place, and we got off a little bit early, and so we would say, "Hey, let's go out the back door to the motel, and we're gonna meet some of the locals, and we're gonna go over to this pizza parlor." And I think the place was called the Purple Pickle. I don't know why I remembered that, but I think it was called the Purple because this is 40 years ago.
Yeah.
And so we go out the back door, we go in there, and there's some locals there, and it's like, "We're gonna order a pizza. What do you want?" I said, "Just pepperoni pizza." "We're gonna get a pineapple pepper." And I said, "What?" They ordered a pineapple pepperoni pizza, and I fell in love with it. And ever since then, it's like pineapple pepperoni, pineapple
Pineapple,
pepperoni
pineapple pepperoni from the Purple Pickle.
from the Purple Pickle in British Columbia.
All right. I like it. I love it.
Unbelievable.
That's great. What a great plug. That's fantastic. Well, Pete, thank you so much for this episode. This has been tremendous. I really enjoyed it. And I think people are going to really like it as well. So, thank
Thank
you
you.
again. Yeah. Well,
Thanks for spending the time.
I would love to do it in person one of these days. That'd be a lot of fun.
I'm here and sitting in the sunshine.
Maybe I'll come down here one of these
Yeah, man.
days.
Come down for tacos.
Oh, now we're talking. We'll talk about that over on the other episode, I think. All right, everybody. For Pete, this is Blake. And as always, good luck and good tones. Alrighty, folks, there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. Pete is just a delight to talk to, and I hope that you check out his book. It's called How to Produce a Record, A Player's Philosophy for Making a Great Recording. I am so excited to read this thing and see how I can apply some of his brains to my own material. Also, if you really enjoyed this episode, you're really going to enjoy the Patreon bonus episode. We go all over the place. We talk about all kinds of stuff. Man, it is so good. I really enjoyed this conversation. Big shout out to Pete for taking the time to hang out, and big shout out to his team for reaching out. I'm really honored that they decided that this was a good platform for him to come on and discuss things. And thank you to all of you who are listening. Seriously, these things would not happen if it weren't for you. I'm not saying that with any kind of hyperbole whatsoever. If you were not listening to this right now, I would not get the opportunity to have these conversations. So thank you so much. I really appreciate you. I hope all is good wherever you're at, and I will talk to you on the internet very soon. Bye-bye. One last thing before we totally sign off here. I just want to remind you that if you do any shopping at Stringjoy, that's Stringjoy guitar strings made in Nashville, that will help me out as well. As I've said for years, I'm heavily involved in that company, and I really do think they're making the best products on the market. So if you would like to try custom strings, go to tonemob.com/stringjoy and check them out today. I seriously love what the team down there is doing. I help them out with all kinds of things, and by you supporting them, you are also supporting me as well. And hey, you need some strings, so why not get some custom strings just for your guitar and playing style? Again, the link for that is tonemob.com/stringjoy, and that will take you right to their website, and you can do all your shopping through there, and that will help everyone involved out. So thank you very much. Talk to you next time. We are brought to you by the wonderful folks at Gun Street Wiring Shop. Yes, Gun Street Wiring Shop. I've talked about them before. I used to say based out of Bend, Oregon, but guess what? Sean moved to my neck of the woods. Sean's in Portland. Sean is awesome and has helped me with a bunch of stuff lately. And if you have wiring needs for your guitar, he can help you too. If you want to get weird with it, he can get weird. If you just need to spruce things up a little bit, there's your guy. He takes all the guesswork out of doing your guitar wiring, and he makes it simple, and his customer service is top-notch, and I can't say enough good things about Gun Street as a company. I really respect Sean and what he's all about, and the product is top-notch. I've got 3 different guitars that now have Gun Street harnesses in them, and I could not be happier. So go to gunstreetwiringshop.com and check them out.
Hey, this is Mike Wiebe, and I'm the singer in a band called the Riverboat Gamblers.
And I'm Zach Blair. I play guitar in a band called Rise Against. Mike and I also have a band called the Draculas, and we also have this great, amazing new podcast called Zach and Mike Make 3.
Yeah, each week we're going to ask ourselves and we're going to ask our guests what 3 favorite things they are into at that moment or in their entire lives. And then we're either going to agree with them or we're going to make fun of them. And you're going to listen to it and you're going to like it, or we will make fun of you. How about that? I just flipped it on you, the person listening to this right now. But we're going to do it every week here on the Sound Talent Network. Once again, it's called Zach and Mike Make 3.
Yeah.
Hey, this is Chris Santos, host of Delirious Nomads, the Blacklight Media podcast, part of the Sound Talent Media podcast network. Delirious Nomads is a podcast about all things heavy metal, as well as breakdowns of your favorite combat sports. And me being a chef and all, we'll be riffing on some food talk every week with very special guests from across the globe. Listen and subscribe at soundtalentmedia.com.